Guts from Berserk is one of the most iconic yet tortured characters in all of anime. Every step of his life is a constant struggle for survival, filled with betrayal and some of the worst things any human can experience. However, despite the constant suffering, Guts seems to always fight back against the evils of his world and swing his massive sword as his only way of eventually obtaining a peaceful life. Today, we'll be going over his entire life, from his cursed birth to his current struggle to defeat the divine entity and former friend, Griffith. This is going to be a brutal one, so get ready, and let's get started right now. Guts' life began in a nightmare. Born from the corpse of his hanging mother beneath a tree, he was left for dead in a pool of blood and afterbirth. A passing mercenary band, led by Gambino, discovered the grisly scene and assumed the infant was already gone. But when he cried out, a woman named Shisu took him in, seeing him as a sign of hope. Gambino begrudgingly allowed it, despite his men whispering that the child's birth was an omen of misfortune. 3 years later, Shisu succumbed to the plague, leaving Guts truly alone. At just 6 years old, he was forced into training with a sword, wielding a weapon far too large for his small frame.
ガッツよお前もうちょっと体に合った剣を使ったらどうだやだ強情なガキだ
By 9, he was fighting along Gambino's mercenaries, idolizing the leader as a father figure. But that illusion shattered when another mercenary, Donovan, attacked, abused, and violated him, claiming that Gambino had sold him for a single night. On the other hand, after losing his leg in battle, Gambino blamed Guts for his misfortunes. The abuse worsened, and eventually, in a drunken rage, Gambino tried to kill him.
一体何の恨みがある恩をあだで返しやがって
ガンビーノ、俺は
貴様は悪魔の子だよ不運を呼び込む呪われた子供だ
He revealed that he indeed sold Guts to Donovan. Shocked and left with no choice, Guts struck back, killing the only father he had ever known.
子孫を殺したてめえが犬ころみたいに懐いてくるのがなてめえは死ぬべきだったんだよ
The other mercenaries turned on him instantly, branding him a murderer. Forced to flee, he ran until he reached a dead end and was shot off a cliff. His unconscious body was left to fate, but he survived, only to be scooped up by another mercenary group, one that saw him as nothing more than another expendable soldier. Guts, still just a boy, found himself on the losing side of yet another battle. Captured alongside his comrades, he was sentenced to forced labor. There, he met a man named Martino, who tricked him into thinking that they could escape together. Instead, Martino used Guts as a distraction and left him behind to be recaptured and thrown into a freezing prison cell. In that dark and lonely place, Guts encountered something unexpected. A spirit named Chich, a forlorn flower fairy. She took pity on him and nursed his wounds, giving him the strength to fight again. But healing him came at a cost. As she used the last of her magic, Chith withered away, leaving behind only a few petals. Determined to honor her sacrifice, Guts swore to take what remained of her to a valley of flowers like her. He fought his captor's son in brutal combat, winning his freedom just as his mercenary allies stormed the castle. With blood and fire in his wake, Guts kept his promise, laying Chith's petals to rest in the Valley of Radiant Blooms before continuing his endless march forward. At 15, Guts was already a seasoned fighter, cutting down enemies with brutal efficiency. During a siege on a military garrison, he took down the formidable warrior Bazuso, shifting the tide of battle, but his victory made him a target. Members of the Band of the Falcon, a rising mercenary group, attacked him to claim his reward. He cut through most of them with ease, until he met Griffith. In a swift and decisive clash, Griffith defeated Guts and dragged him back to the Falcon camp. Days later, Guts awoke to an offer: join the Band of the Falcon. He refused, instead challenging Griffith to a duel, wagering his freedom. Griffith accepted, and in a battle of skill and precision, he once again bested Guts.
Superior attitude of yours that makes me sick! But you're going down!
True to his words, Guts was forced into the ranks of the Falcon, but not everyone welcomed him. During one of his first raids with the Falcons, Guts found himself surrounded when his horse was killed. Before the enemy could strike him down, Griffith, Judo, and Pippin intervened, ensuring his survival. That night, as the Falcons celebrated their victory, Pippin pulled Guts into the festivities, where he found himself cautiously welcomed by Judo and Rickard. The next day, Griffith summoned him. Guts found the commander bathing, leading to an oddly playful water fight. It was here that Griffith spoke of his ambitions, declaring that he would one day have his own kingdom, and he made something clear: Guts belonged to him.
You must fight for me, because you belong to me.
3 years passed, and Guts, now 18, has risen to the captain of the band of the Falcons Raiders. Their success on the battlefield earned them formal recognition by the Midland Army and the war against Tudor. But in one crucial siege, progress stalled. A monstrous warrior was tearing through Guts' men, piling up bodies inside the enemy stronghold. Frustrated, Guts stormed in alone, only to come face to face with a nightmare. Nosferatu Zod was no ordinary opponent. His presence alone radiated pure terror, and his strikes nearly shattered Guts' bones. But Guts was no stranger to impossible odds. With a desperate, calculated swing, he landed a deep cut on Zod. This was a feat no human had achieved in 3 centuries. The demon only grinned, delighted to have found a warrior who could actually wound him. Then, in an instant, Zod transformed, revealing his monstrous true form.
Fight an opponent like you. This is what I've been waiting for. I have soldiered on for 300 years to meet someone like you.
Guts was completely outmatched, barely clinging to life when Griffith arrived with reinforcements. Together, they managed to wound Zod, but the battle took a sudden turn when the demon noticed Griffith's crimson Beherit. He halted his attack, and instead delivered a cryptic warning. If Griffith's dream were to crumble, Guts would face an inescapable death. With that, Zod vanished into the night. Soon after, the Falcons were assigned to guard King Midland during a royal hunt, but Griffith was nearly assassinated by a stray arrow, saved only by his Beherit. Suspecting General Julius as the culprit, Griffith ordered Guts to eliminate him. Without hesitation, Guts infiltrated Julius's manor and executed the general. But as he struck, the door opened, and his sword ran straight through Julius's young son, Adonis. The child's lifeless eyes haunted him as he cut his way through the castle guards, escaping through the sewers. The weight of his actions grew heavier when he overheard Griffith speaking to Princess Charlotte. Griffith described the band of Falcons as loyal comrades, but not as equals.
Men live and die by their dreams, but long after they've been abandoned, they still smolder deep in men's hearts. Some see nothing more than life and death. They are dead, for they have no dreams.
Hearing this, Guts felt a crack in their bond. Had he never truly been more than a tool for Griffith's ambition? For the first time, he questioned whether he was fighting for himself or simply living in the shadow of another man's dream. After a few days, during a battle with the Blue Whale Knights, Guts noticed Casca struggling against an enemy commander, Adon. Stepping in, he swiftly defeated the spearmen, but the fight took an unexpected turn when Casca, weakened and feverish, staggered off a cliff. Guts caught her, but Adon, desperate for revenge, shot him off his horse, sending both mercenaries plummeting into a river below. Pulling them ashore, Guts found shelter from the rain. He soon realized Casca wasn't suffering from a fever, but something more personal, her menstrual cycle. Stripping off her drenched clothes, he used his own body heat to keep her warm. When she woke up, embarrassed and furious, she attacked him, lashing out at her own perceived weakness as a soldier. Guts subdued her and asked why she became a mercenary. Casca revealed her devotion to Griffith, explaining how she once idolized him and how Griffith's interest in Guts had shaken her. Their conversation was cut short when Tudor's troops neared their location, forcing them to plan their escape. That night, they found themselves surrounded by enemy soldiers. Fighting together, they cut their way through the horde, but Casca's condition made prolonged combat impossible. Guts told her to escape and return to Griffith, staying behind to hold off the attackers. In a brutal and exhausting battle, he single-handedly slaughtered approximately 100 Tudor soldiers, earning him the legendary title 100-Man Slayer. When he was finally found and brought back to the Band of the Falcon's encampment, he shared his thoughts with Casca. He admired the group's unity and dedication, but felt that he didn't truly belong among their bonfire of dreams. His words hinted at what was to come, his departure from the band. Despite his injuries, Guts soon found himself at the gates of Doldrey, ready for a decisive battle against the Tudor army. Griffith split the Band of the Falcons into two groups, one led by him and Guts to lure the enemy away, while Casca's unit infiltrated the fortress. As the battle raged, Guts faced off against the formidable General Boskin of the Purple Rhino Knights. The duel was intense, but Guts' blade, worn from his previous battle, finally broke. Now armed with only a small knife, he seemed doomed, until a massive cleaver-like sword landed at his feet. Wielding it with raw strength, Guts decapitated both Boskin and his horse in a single crushing blow. Moments later, cheers erupted from the fortress. Casca had successfully taken Doldrey. With their general and stronghold lost, the remaining Tudor forces scattered in defeat. The Band of the Falcon returned to Midland in triumph, celebrated by the kingdom's citizens and nobility. A month later, Guts made his decision. He would leave the Band of the Falcon. He had fought for Griffith's dream long enough, but now he sought his own. On the morning of his departure, Judo, Corcus, and Casca intercepted him, demanding an explanation. In a tavern, Guts revealed his desire to stand as an equal to Griffith, not as a mere follower. As he left Windham, he was confronted by Griffith himself. Refusing to let Guts walk away, Griffith challenged him to a duel, just as he did 3 years before.
If you wish to be free of me, the rules have not changed. It is as it was before. Draw your sword and take your freedom from me.
Griffith, please!
Would you settle for a smile and a fond farewell?
But this time, Guts was stronger. In a single strike, he shattered Griffith's sword, leaving him kneeling in defeat. Without another word, Guts turned and walked away. That night, alone by the campfire, he was visited by the mysterious Skull Knight. The armor-figured warned of an impending eclipse, a storm of madness and death that no human could withstand.
Soon a rain of blood, the likes of which you cannot imagine, shall fall down upon you. It will be a storm of death. But take heed, struggler. Struggle, endure, contend. For that alone is the sword of one who defies death. Do not forget these words.
Then he vanished into the darkness. Determined to forge his own destiny, Guts spent the next year training in the mountains, honing his swordsmanship, and frequently visiting the blacksmith, Godo. He realized his blade was more than a weapon, it was an extension of himself. Seeking stronger foes, he entered a combat tournament and effortlessly defeat a foreign warrior named Salat. After the battle, the tournament host offered Guts a job and mentioned something that caught him off guard. Casca was now leading the Band of the Falcon. The revelation left him stunned, signaling that while he had moved on, the past was not done with him yet. Guts tracked down his former comrades and arrived just in time to intervene in an enemy raid, led by the foreign warrior, Salat. Once again, Guts bested Salat, forcing him and his men to retreat. The surviving Falcons welcomed Guts back, informing him of Griffith's capture and year-long imprisonment, their exile from Midland, and Casca's leadership. Afterward, Casca took Guts to a secluded waterfall, where her bottled-up emotions finally erupted. Furious over his departure and burdened by the weight of leading the band, she attempted to throw herself off a cliff. Guts caught her, holding her in a desperate embrace. The moment escalated into passion, and the two made love, cementing their relationship.
You fool! You fool!
With Guts back, the Band of the Falcon organized a rescue mission. 3 days later, they infiltrated Windham's sewers with the help of Princess Charlotte. Deep in the Tower of Rebirth, they found Griffith, a broken man tortured beyond recognition. His body was flayed, his tongue severed, and his tendons cut. Overwhelmed with sorrow, Guts embraced him, not realizing Griffith weakly attempted to choke him. Fueled by rage, Guts slaughtered the jailer responsible for Griffith's suffering. The rescue team escaped through the sewers, battling assassins sent to kill Griffith. Once outside the city, they made their way towards Midland border, only to be intercepted by the Black Dog Knights, a ruthless unit led by the Apostle Wild. Despite their best efforts, the Falcons struggled against Wild's monstrous form. Guts temporarily incapacitated him, but Wild rose again, grabbing Griffith and exposing his grievous condition to the horrified Falcons. Wild demanded Griffith summon the God Hand, but when Griffith failed to respond, the Apostle realized the Crimson Beherit was missing. Suddenly, Zod appears, ripping Wild in two. Before flying off, he ominously told Griffith that his Beherit will soon return to him. At the border, the Falcon confronted the harsh reality. Griffith would never lead them again. Casca urged Guts to leave, believing it was the only way he could fulfill Griffith's idea of a true friend. Overhearing this, a distraught Griffith, barely able to move, seized a carriage and fled. The Falcons pursued, only to watch him crash into a lake. As Guts reached Griffith, the world around them shifted. The Crimson Beherit had returned. They were transported to a nightmarish realm where monstrous beings welcomed them to the Eclipse. Four godlike figures emerge, the God Hand, revealing the grim truth. Griffith was destined to sacrifice his comrades in exchange for becoming one of them. The Falcons watched in horror as Griffith, despite his suffering, reaffirmed his dream. He offered his closest friends as sacrifices. One by one, the mercenaries were branded, sealing their fate. Demons descended upon the band, slaughtering them mercilessly. Guts fought with everything he had, but he was hopelessly outnumbered. Then, he saw the unthinkable. Griffith, now reborn as the dark god Femto, took Casca for himself. Guts, restrained by a demon biting down on his arm, watched in helpless rage as Femto violated Casca. Guts severed his own arm to break free, but before he could reach her, another demon pinned him down, gouging out his right eye. Blinded and in agony, he could do nothing but watch. At the last moment, the Skull Knight breached the Eclipse, rescuing Guts and Casca. With supernatural speed, he evaded Femto's attacks and escaped the Nightmare Realm. 4 days later, Guts awoke in the blacksmith Godo's cave, only to find Casca mentally broken. The trauma had shattered her mind, leaving her unable to recognize him. Overwhelmed with grief and rage, he ran off into the night, where he was attacked by vengeful spirits drawn to his brand of sacrifice. The Skull Knight appeared again, warning Guts that he now existed in the interstice, forever trapped between the mortal and astral realms, hunted by the demonic. As the spirit suddenly disappeared, the Skull Knight cryptically remarked that they had found another torch in the darkness. Realizing Casca was in danger, Guts rushed back to find her surrounded by ghostly entities. Before he could intervene, she gave birth to a monstrous child, his and Casca's offspring, tainted by Femto's violation. At sunrise, the demonic infant faded into the astral world. Fueled by an insatiable desire for vengeance, Guts spent a month recovering and trading. Godo outfitted him with new armor and an artificial arm equipped with a hidden cannon. When an apostle sensed his presence and attacked, Guts put his new weaponry to the test. His sword shattered against the beast, forcing him to grab Godo's long-abandoned Dragon Slayer, a massive, unwieldy slab of iron. In a single devastating strike, he cleaved the apostle in two. Realizing the Dragon Slayer was the perfect weapon for his war against demonkind, Guts took up the sword and set out on his path of vengeance. From that moment on, he was no longer just a wandering mercenary. He was the Black Swordsman. For 2 years, Guts waged a relentless war against the Apostles. While traveling, Guts encountered and killed an unidentified female apostle before arriving in the town of Koka. He made his presence known immediately, slaughtering a group of thugs in a tavern and leaving one survivor to spread the message: the Black Swordsman has come. In the process, he had freed an imprisoned elf named Puck, who later returned the favor by healing Guts when he was captured and thrown into jail. Words of Guts' arrival reached the apostle ruling the area, the sadistic Snake Lord. Riding through Koka, the apostle burned everything in his path in search of his attacker, leaving a trail of corpses. Guts intercepted him, and the two engaged in a brutal fight. Despite the Snake Lord's monstrous form, Guts overpowered him, interrogated him about the God Hand, and left him to burn in the wreckage of the town. Guts soon set his sight on another target, the Count, a ruthless apostle ruling over his own territory. He arrived in town during a public execution of supposed heretics and was quickly targeted by the Count's guards, led by Commander Zondark. Dispatching the soldiers with ease, Guts badly disfigured Zondark and escaped with help from Vargas, who was a deformed man with a personal vendetta against the Count. Vargas revealed that he had once been tortured by the Count and had stolen a mysterious Beherit from him 7 years prior. He showed Guts a secret passage into the castle, but before their plan could unfold, they were ambushed by a transformed Zondark. In the ensuing battle, the lab was destroyed, forcing Guts and Vargas to separate. Before parting ways, Guts took the Beherit for himself. Unfortunately, Vargas was soon captured and publicly executed. Guts, unfazed but resolute, vowed to finish what the man had started. Using Vargas' secret passage, Guts infiltrated the castle, cutting through guards and finally eliminating Zondark. He then confronted the Count, who transformed into a monstrous slug-like creature. Initially overwhelmed by the apostle's sheer size and strength, Guts managed to turn the tide. With Puck's assistance, he used his cannon arm to cripple the Count, gaining the upper hand. Desperate, the Count grabbed his fallen Beherit and activated it, summoning the God Hand. When Guts saw Femto, his rage exploded. Ignoring reason, he attacked, but his strikes were useless against the demonic entity. Femto effortlessly deflected his assault, proving just how vast the power gap between them was. Meanwhile, the Count was given a choice to sacrifice his only daughter Teresia in order to save himself. Terrified, yet unwilling to go that far, he hesitated. The God Hand showed no mercy. Denied his sacrifice, the Count was dragged into the abyss by damned souls. As one branded for sacrifice, Guts was nearly pulled in as well, but he managed to free himself with a blast from his cannon as the temporal rift collapsed. With the nightmare over, Guts found Teresia on the verge of suicide. He stopped her, but rather than comforting her, he planted a different emotion: hatred. He coldly accepted responsibility for her father's death, giving her a reason to live, revenge against him. Fueled by her anger, she swore vengeance. During his travels with Puck, Guts stumbled upon a group of bandits holding a girl named Jill hostage. Before he can intervene, an evil spirit-possessed tree animates and scatters the bandits, leaving Guts to battle the creature until dawn. Jill takes him to her village, where he learns about Misty Valley. It was home to a swarm of child-snatching elf-like creatures led by an apostle named Rosine. Not long after, the so-called elves attacked the village, and Guts discovered a grim truth. The creatures are actually the kidnapped children, transformed by Rosine's power. He burns them without hesitation, horrifying the villagers who blame him for the charred corpses left behind. Using Jill as a hostage, he escapes the village and sets out to eliminate Rosine. Jill follows Guts, but he dismisses her as a nuisance. This backfires when Rosine abducts the girl, forcing Guts to track her to the Misty Valley. There, he finds the bandits from earlier, now mutated into grotesque pseudo-apostles serving Rosine. After cutting them down, he burns the cocoon of developing elves, setting the valley ablaze. Rosine, in rage, transforms into her true apostle forms and engages Guts in a high-speed battle. Though initially overwhelmed, he uses Jill as bait, drawing Rosine in and landing a fatal strike. Just as he prepares to finish her, he is shot by Jill's father, Zepek, who arrived with the Holy Iron Chain Knights. Wounded and outnumbered, Guts is forced to retreat. Still injured from his fight with Rosine, Guts is soon tracked down by the Holy Iron Chain Knights. Led by Farnese, the Knights seek to capture him under a prophecy naming him the Falcon of Darkness. Though he fends off most of his attackers, he is overpowered by their vice commander, Azan. Seeing no way to escape, he attempts to kill Fernice to destabilize the Knights, but is incapacitated by her attendant, Serpico, and taken prisoner.
骨の1、2本ねえこの足じゃいつまでもかわしきれねえそれにこのおっさんただの怪力バカじゃねえおのれチョコバカとさみだれつけ
At the Knight's encampment, Fernice interrogates Guts, attempting to break him. He mocks her blind faith, exposing her inner doubts. That night, Puck frees him, allowing him to reclaim his weapons, take Fernice hostage, and escape. Spirits, drawn by his brand, pursue them, shaking Fernice's already fragile beliefs. During their escape, they encountered a possessed horse attempting to violate Fernice, triggering Guts' memory of Casca suffering during the eclipse. Enraged, he slaughters the possessed animals. As dawn nears, Fernice, now possessed herself, begins to attack Gus in a lustful frenzy. The spirits release her at sunrise, and Serpico arrives, retrieving his shaken mistress. Still recovering, Guts is visited by his demon child, who imparts a vision of Casca burning at the stake. Determined to find her, he returns to Godos, only to learn she is missing. Rickard informs him of Albion, a city overrun with refugees fleeing a plague, Guts' next destination. On his way to Albion, Guts dispatches a group of Bakiraka scouts, catching the attention of a young thief named Isidro, who begins following him. Soon after, the Skull Knight intercepts him, warning of an impending event that will return the Falcon to the physical world. Arriving in Albion, Guts and his allies locate Casca in a cultist den. As he fights off possessed cultists and the Holy Iron Chain Knights, he entrusts Casca to Isidro's care, and faces a grotesque goat-like pseudo-apostle. After slaying the creature, he attempts to flee, but is ambushed by Serpico. Using the narrow cliffside to his advantage, Serpico tries to eliminate him, but Guts' brute strength shatters his sword, forcing Serpico to retreat.
そうでもねえさこのまま剣を引き抜けばあなたの指は反射神経と腕力なあと俺の手の皮は分厚い
Guts reunites with Isidro, only to learn Casca has been captured by the Holy Iron Chain Knights. He infiltrates the Tower of Conviction, using intimidation to force Fernice to lead him to the underground torture chamber. Finding no sign of Casca, he scales the tower and confronts the frantical Inquisitor Mazgus and his 6 disciples, now twisted pseudo-apostles. A brutal battle starts, and Guts manages to kill 4 of them. However, Mazgus and his 2 remaining followers escape with Casca in tow, setting the stage for yet another desperate pursuit. As Albion descends into chaos, Guts watches in horror as a citywide brand of sacrifice ignites, signaling a massive sacrificial event. At the center of it all, Casca is about to be burned at the stake in a witch trial. Isidro redeems himself by cutting her free, while Guts dives from the collapsing tower, driving his blade through the airborne pseudo-apostle Mazgus.
かなり厄介な相手だしかも7匹
ガッツ後ろだすげえ俺様のセコンドがあったればこそだ
小僧頭の上に変なもんが
Mazgus transforms into a monstrous armored form, his only vulnerabilities being his mouth and an exposed part on his sternum. Despite suffering heavy injuries, Guts exploits these weaknesses, finally striking Mazgus down. But victory is short-lived. A tidal wave of anguish materializes from Albion's tormented dead, consuming countless refugees. With nowhere left to run, Guts, alongside Puck, Isidro, Fernice, Serpico, and a knight named Jerome, hold the monastery's last defensible position. They light torches, using fire to ward off the encroaching malice until sunrise. As dawn breaks, the dark tide vanishes, and Albion crumbles completely. Before the survivors can recover, a Kushan force ambushes them. Amid the chaos, Nosferatu, Zod, and the Skull Knight arrive, pointing towards a distant pillar of light. As Griffith emerges in his new form, Guts is momentarily consumed by rage, ready to strike. But a single thought stops him: Casca. Realizing he's about to abandon her again for revenge, He instead mounts a Kushan horse, taking her with him, while Zod carries Griffith away. Returning to Goto's home, Guts learns of the blacksmith's passing. Erika asks him to stay with her and Casca, and for a moment he considers it. However, upon hearing of a silver-haired visitor speaking with Rickard, he rushes to the Hill of Swords, where he comes face to face with Griffith. Standing atop the graves of the Band of the Falcon, Griffith admits he felt nothing when sacrificing them. In rage, Guts lunges at him, only for Nosferatu Zod to intercept the blow. The two warriors engage in a fierce battle, with Zod destroying Goto's mind in the process. Amid the chaos, Casca runs towards them, but is nearly crushed by the falling debris. Surprisingly, Griffith saves her. This unexpected act shakes him, and without another word, he departs with Zod. Before leaving, he reminds Guts, "You should have known. This is the man I am. You of all people." In the aftermath, Guts finally tells Rickard the truth about the eclipse, but when Rickard asks to join him, Guts refuses, knowing the boy could never truly hate Griffith. With nowhere safe for Casca, he sets off for Elfhelm, where Puck claims she will be protected. With only Puck as an ally, Guts alone defends Casca from relentless specters drawn to their brands of sacrifice. One night, a possessing spirit briefly overtakes him, and he nearly strangles her. The incident shatters what little trust remained, leaving Casca afraid and hostile towards him. He begins tying her up to prevent her from wandering off. One day she escapes and stumbles upon a band of rapacious thieves. By the time Guts arrives, the men are dead, and Casca stands blood-covered and enraged. When he restrains her, the berserker within him stirs, and he nearly forces himself on her before regaining control. Disgusted with himself, he realizes the depths of his descent into darkness. That night, Puck returns with Isidro, Farnese, and Serpico. Farnese, now secularized, asks to join Guts. Haunted by his recent loss of control, he accepts, knowing that he can no longer trust himself alone with Casca. The group eventually encounters Morgan, an elder from the Enoch village, seeking a witch's aid against troll attacks. They escort him home and locate the mansion of the Spirit Tree, where they meet the young witch Shirka and her mentor Flora. She offers talismans to suppress the brand's effects, but only if Guts and his allies assist Shirka in defending Enoch from the trolls. During the battle, Shirka calls upon the River Spirit, the Lady of the Depths, to sweep the invaders away. However, she loses control, causing a massive flood that washes Casca and Farnese away. Guts, Isidro, and Shirka track them to Cliffith, a nightmarish abyss filled with demons and horrors. Inside, they find Farnese and Casca overwhelmed by trolls, along with other captive women and children. Guts holds the horde at bay while the others escape. Amid the carnage, Slan, a God Hand member, materializes from the corpses, delighted to meet Guts again. She ensnares him, slicing open his chest and tempting him to use his Beherit. Before Slan can break him, the Skull Knight arrives. Seizing the moment, Guts drives his Dragon Slayer, now imbued with malice from slain astral beings, through Slan, dissolving her form. With Clifford collapsing, Skull Knight banishes the remaining creatures into the abyss. After escaping from the Clifford, Guts and his companions head back to Flora's mansion. But before they can reach safety, Guts collapses from an astral wound inflicted by Slan. As they approach the mansion, Shirka senses a breach in the protective barrier, and Guts' brand of sacrifice begins bleeding. Upon arrival, they find the Spirit Tree engulfed in flames and apostles attacking. Amidst the chaos, the Skull Knight arrives to aid Guts, battling alongside him against the apostles to protect Flora. Soon Zod and Grunbeld, a massive apostle warrior, enter the fray. Grunbeld proclaims himself as a member of Griffith's new band of Falcons, shocking Guts. Seeing Guts in a weakened state, Grunbeld loses interest and prepares to finish him off. With Shirka's help, Guts barely manages to retreat into the treasure chamber beneath the Spirit Tree, where his companions equip him with the Berserker armor. Now infused with the armor's overwhelming power, Guts easily overpowers Grunbeld, forcing the Apostle to assume his dragon form. However, the armor's influence begins to consume Guts' mind, pushing him to the brink of losing control. Only Shirka's intervention, diving into his subconscious and reminding him of his identity, allows Guts to reclaim his ego. Flora appears in a new spiritual form, holding back the apostles long enough for Guts and his companions to escape. After nearly a month of recovery, Guts and his group settle in a seaside cabin, preparing for their journey to Vertanis. One night, the Skull Knight warns Guts that the Berserker armor comes at a cost, explaining that prolonged use may rob him of his humanity. He also reveals that Elfhelm's ruler, the Flower Storm Monarch, might have the power to restore Casca's mind. However, he cautions that Casca's desires may not align with Guts' own. Shortly after, a mysterious child appears, showing an unusual connection to Guts and Casca. The night is interrupted when a Kushan attack begins, as crocodile familiars, controlled by hidden spellcasters, ambush the group. Serpico eliminates the sorcerers, but a giant Makara attacks. Guts, still weakened, struggles before succumbing once more to the Berserk armor's influence. He destroys the beast, but then he turns on his own allies. Before he can attack, a childlike luminous figure appears in his mind, allowing Shurka to break the armor's hold once again. Upon reaching Vertanis, the group seeks passage to Skellig, but most ships have been commandeered for the Holy Sea's war against the Kushan. Vernice reunites with her noble Van Diemen family, who offers to fund their voyage, but only if she agrees to return home. Suspicious of her family's true motives, Guts suspects that Vernice is being used as a bargaining chip and decides to infiltrate a wartime ball to assess the situation. However, Serpico challenges him to a duel, believing that Vernice is safer away from Guts. The fight takes place in a pillar-filled colonnade, where Serpico uses the terrain to restrict Guts' movement. Despite the disadvantage, Guts strategically destroys the pillars, forcing Serpico to surrender without resorting to the Berserker armor. Inside the ball, chaos erupts as Tiger Familiars attack, slaughtering nobles and Holy See officials. Guts, urged by Vernice and Shurka, reluctantly stays to fight, preventing further casualties. Afterward, he asks Vernice if she truly wishes to return to nobility. She dismisses the question, claiming she just wanted a brief taste of her old life. The mission takes a drastic turn when Emperor Ganishka of Kushan appears in mist form, declaring war on the Holy See Alliance. Realizing that the city will soon become a battleground, Guts and his companions secure passage on a warship, captained by Roderick, Vernice's suitor. Before they can escape, Guts and his group are ambushed at the port by Ganishka's monstrous Pashakcha army. Using Shurka's fire spirit magic, Serpico's sylph magic, and Guts' controlled use of the Berserk armor, they manage to eliminate the horde and kill the Kushan commander, Daiba. Enraged by his subordinate's failure, Ganishka strikes both Daiba and Guts with lightning, then offers Guts the chance to join him, impressed by his strength. Guts rejects the offer, and before Ganishka can strike again, Griffith's apostles arrive, led by Zod. The band of the Falcons launch an aerial assault on Ganishka, but the Emperor effortlessly repels them. A wounded Zod crashes into Guts, and the two form an uneasy alliance. Riding on Zod's backs, Guts soars through the air and plunges the Dragon Slayer into Ganishka, causing the Emperor's mist form to dissipate. After the battle, Guts provokes Zod by inquiring about Griffith's whereabouts, hinting at his unresolved vendetta. However, Guts clarifies that he has no interest in their war, prompting Zod to leave the fight for another day. Aboard the Seahorse, Guts and his crew witness the transformation of the world with the emergence of Fantasia. As they travel the Western Sea, they face multiple attacks from the undead pirate Bonebeard and his ghostly crew. During their second encounter, Bonebeard's forces severely damage the Seahorse, forcing them to dock on a remote island for repairs. However, the island's inhabitants, aside from one lone survivor, have been transformed into monstrous tentacles of the Sea God. Guts engages the Sea God's extensions in battle, but when Bonebeard's ship unleashes additional tentacles, he's pushed to his limit. In desperation, he succumbs to the Berserker armor's power. Once again, his rage is subdued by the appearance of a childlike luminous body, allowing him to regain control. Realizing the Sea God must be defeated before they can leave the island, Guts descends into the creature's underwater lair, with Shurka using her luminous form to keep his mind anchored. He navigates through the beast's monstrous defenses, eventually slicing through his stomach lining to reach his heart. However, the combination of the Sea God's overwhelming presence, the armor's toll on his body, and a swarm of protective creatures nearly renders him immobile. As he teeters on the brink of unconsciousness, the singing of Meros, or sea spirits, weakens the Sea God, allowing him to land a decisive blow. He drives his Dragon Slayer deep into the creature's heart, killing it. The Sea God's final gush of blood engulfs him, separating him from Shurka's influence. Just as he begins to accept his impending death in the darkness, the childlike luminous body appears again, guiding him towards an exit. With the help of Meros, Guts is carried to the surface, and the Seahorse sets sail for Skellig. Upon arriving at Skellig, Guts and his party face magical defenses designed to keep outsiders away. After overcoming these obstacles, they are met by Skellig's sorcerers, including the Archmage Gedfring, who leads them to his manor. Guts immediately requests an audience with the Flower Storm Monarch, the ruler of Elfhelm, hoping to restore Casca's mind. However, Gedfring advises the group to rest first. The next day, the group is escorted to the Spirit Tree Palace, where the attendant Danan reveals herself as the Flower Storm Monarch. She explains that Casca's fragmented mind can be restored using the Corridor of Dreams ritual. However, she warns that Guts' presence would hinder the process due to Casca's fear of him. With no choice but to wait, Guts entrusts Casca to Shirka and Farnese. After the ritual's completion, Casca regains her sanity, but upon seeing Guts, she is immediately overwhelmed by memories of the eclipse and the screams and terror. Realizing that his presence distresses her, Guts distances himself. Farnese later convinces Casca to approach him, and they share a brief conversation about their journey and their companions. However, the mention of judo triggers more painful memories, causing her to collapse in shock once more. A saddened Guts walks away. Later, Guts reflects on his struggles while wielding the Dragon Slayer, growing concerned about his reliance on the Berserker armor. He visits the blacksmith dwarf Hanar, who created the armor, and experiences visions of his previous users, all of whom were consumed by his power. This raises questions about his fate and his similarity to the Skull Knight. That night, Guts encounters the mysterious boy once again, who playfully interacts with him before being taken to Casca. The following day, Guts trains by the waterfall, but notices his vision blurring and his grip on the Dragon Slayer weakening. The boy appears again, momentarily lifting his spirits. That night, however, Guts and Casca witness the boy undergo a shocking transformation into Griffith. Griffith's arrival in Elfhelm triggers a surge of memories in Casca, causing her brand of sacrifice to bleed as she collapses. Enraged, Guts launches an attack, but Griffith effortlessly phases through his strikes. As Zod momentarily restrains Guts, Griffith calmly approaches Casca. When Guts finally breaks free and moves to strike again, he hesitates upon seeing Griffith gently cradling Casca. As Skellig begins to collapse, Griffith mounts Zod and departs with Casca. Guts, powerless to stop him, is left stranded as the island falls apart. He's eventually rescued by Roderick's crew and taken aboard the Seahorse. Plunged into deep despair, he isolates himself, unable to process his failure. Shirka, using her luminous self, peers into his mind, witnessing the Dragon Slayer's long history of battle and sensing the chains restraining the Beast of Darkness beginning to break. The Beast whispers to Guts, offering him power in exchange for complete control. At that moment, Kushan's soldiers storm the ship, capturing the crew. Shockingly, one of the soldiers reveals himself to be Rickard, who explains that the Kushans are seizing the ship for their own purposes. Meanwhile, Guts remains unresponsive, allowing himself to be imprisoned without resistance. Locked away in a Kushan dungeon, Guts' brand begins to bleed once again, as he senses an approaching apostle. The creature, Rakshas, enters his cell, ready to kill him. Overcome with grief, Guts doesn't fight back, instead accepting death. Just as Rakshas is about to strike, Silit intervenes, saving Guts and demanding an explanation for his willingness to die. Guts remains silent, unable to answer. Thus the legendary Black Swordsman, once feared and unstoppable, finds himself broken, his strength drained, his will shattered, and his reason for fighting stolen away.